Okay, so this is the Bible study for Matthew chapter 2, verse 13 through chapter 3, verse 25. And we're just continuing on with our study of Matthew. Last week, we talked about the birth of Jesus. So you remember that the Gospels are the story of the life of Christ. And so we're going through that. So it seems kind of Christmassy right here in August, but that's all right. We can handle that. Uh, Read with me in Matthew chapter 2. The text for today says, "When they had gone, an angel of the Lord appeared to Joseph in a dream. 'Get up,' he said, 'take the child and his mother and escape to Egypt. Stay there until I tell you, for Herod is going to search for the child to kill him.' So he got up, took the child and his mother during the night, and left for Egypt, where he stayed until the death of Herod. And so was fulfilled what the Lord had said through the prophet, 'Out of Egypt I called my son.' When Herod realized that he had been outwitted by the Magi, he was furious, and he gave orders to kill all the boys in Bethlehem and its vicinity who were 2 years old and under, in accordance with the time he had learned from the Magi. Then what was said through the prophet Jeremiah was fulfilled. 'A voice is heard in Ramah, weeping and great mourning, Rachel weeping for her children and refusing to be comforted, because they are no more.' After Herod died, an angel of the Lord appeared in a dream to Joseph in Egypt and said, 'Get up, take the child and his mother, and go to the land of Israel, for those who were trying to take the child's life are dead.' So he got up, took the child and his mother, and went to the land of Israel. But when he heard that Archelaus was reigning in Judea in place of his father Herod, he was afraid to go there. Having been warned in a dream, he withdrew to the district of Galilee, and he went and lived in a town called Nazareth. So was fulfilled that he what was said through the prophets, that he would be called a Nazarene." All right. Remember that you can download PDF copies of this Bible study at www.abqnaz.org/alive so that you can follow along with us. Number one in our Bible study says Matthew 2:13 says, "When they had gone." What happened in last week's Bible study and who had gone? A, Magi or something. B, people came from the east to worship the one born king of the Jews, which was disturbing to the current king of the Jews. That's also true. C, Herod tried to get the Magi to tell him if they found him. So he said, "Go make search." He found out when the child was to be born. Come back and tell me when you find him. D says, "The star led them to where the child was, and they worshipped him and gave him gifts." That was also true. In E, they did not return to Herod to tell him where the child was. So that was what happened last week. And when they had gone is referring to the Magi that had gone. So when they had gone, this is what happens next. Number two says, what happens to Josephi? Should be Joseph. That was a extra letter put on there. In 2:13, A, an angel of the Lord appeared to Joseph in a dream. That's true. B, God's messenger, which is what an angel is, a messenger spirit. God sends his messengers, the angels. They do the bidding of God, and that's it. Um, in case we have sort of a funny pseudo Catholic emphasis on angels in New Mexico, that sometimes attributes miraculous things to angels, as if angels had some special power. But angels do the work of God. They are messengers of God. And so God is the one with the power. And I think that it's improper and inappropriate to attribute so much to angels instead of attributing it to God. In fact, it may be a form of angel worship or idolatry. So, um, A messenger, God's messenger, told Joseph to get up and take the child and his mother and escape to Egypt. True. C. God told Joseph to stay in Egypt until he tells him, because Herod is going to search for the child to kill him. Number 3 says, how did Joseph respond according to 2:14 and 15? It says, A, so he got up. What would you do if you were told in a dream by an angel that somebody was going to search for and kill your child? If that person that was going to search for and kill your child was the king, you would probably do something about it. You would respond to God, or at least I hope we would. Perhaps we would think, oh, I just had gas. It was just a funny dream these days, because we really don't believe in the supernatural, I think, as well as we did then. But he responded. He got up. B, he took the child and his mother during the night and left for Egypt. He didn't wait till the next day. He didn't wait till later. He got up in the middle of the night. The Magi had gone, and long day, hard day, and the angel comes in the middle of the night and says, you need to get up and go, because Herod's going to figure all this out, and he's going to be really angry. Um, and so he did it in the middle of the night. He didn't delay. C, he stayed in Egypt until the death of Herod. And that's true. Number 4, what does Matthew tell us about the situation according to 2:15b? It says, where he stayed until the death of Herod, and so was fulfilled what the Lord had said through the prophet, out of Egypt I called my son. So this is what Matthew tells us. This is a fulfillment of what the prophet said. So then the second part, why is this significant according to what we learned in the introductory Bible study? So this might sound like a broken record a little bit. We talked about this in the last Bible study, but just in case you thought, I've read Matthew a ton of times and I've never noticed that he's trying to prove Jesus fulfills the Old Testament prophecy. I've never noticed that. Well, you weren't probably looking for it. So just in case you missed it, just in case you could have missed it again, we are pointing out and seeing over and over Matthew's very particular. If you said, oh, this textual criticism that you're talking about in how we study the Bible, it's crazy. It's this newfangled nonsense that we look at now, and we never had that before. So why do you think that Matthew was written for a Jewish audience? Why do you think that it was written? We don't have that address in the beginning. So if you didn't believe it, if you didn't see, people that are way smarter than me have spent time studying this, and they've seen these things, and these are the reasons. So that's kind of what we're pointing out. These are the things that we're seeing within the text that say, okay, we know Matthew's purpose in writing this, and we know what kind of audience he was writing this to, the kind of audience that this would have been meaningful to. Um, and that's kind of how we look at the text to find out the context. And then once we have that context from certain parts of the text, we can apply that context to some other parts of the text that bring even more meaning out of it. See, so why is this significant? Because, again, we see Matthew showing that Jesus was the fulfillment of Old Testament prophecy. Number 5, was this what the prophet Hosea was talking about? So this was found in the book of Hosea. If you have a footnote in your Bible, perhaps it says this is where it comes from. There's another one down here further that comes from Jeremiah. Um, but the question becomes, and we ask questions like this. So Isaiah has probably more messianic prophecies within the book than any. Of course, it's a huge book also. But we point to a lot of messianic. If I read the book of Isaiah, you might think it was in the book of Matthew. Some of them are. Some of them are quoted in the book of Matthew. But you might say, no, I've heard that. I know that. I think that's in the book of Matthew. No, that's in the book of Isaiah. That's an Old Testament prophecy that is, but we know it so well as a messianic prophecy that we include it when we're talking about Jesus. And sometimes that is because it was quoted when we were talking about Jesus in the book of Matthew. So, but when we studied the book of Isaiah, one of the questions that we ask over and over and over was this talking about the coming of Jesus? Was this coming talking about an Old Testament king such as Hezekiah, or was this talking about the future return of Jesus? And a lot of times the answer that we came out with was yes, it's talking about all of the above. We maybe perhaps the author had intended it to be sort of pointing directly to an Old Testament king that was fulfilled maybe even during that prophet's lifetime or sometime shortly after. But when we read it, we see what God does and sort of these patterns in what God does, and we see and even like the teachers of the law that Herod called together said this prophecy we look to. This is where the boy is going to be born, and we know this because we look into the Old Testament, so we see these patterns. So the question is this what Hosea was talking about? And the first answer says, obviously, Matthew says it was. And maybe that's a good answer. Matthew says, and we believe this is the word of God, Matthew says, this fulfills a prophecy that says, out of Egypt I called my son. But B says, well, reading through Hosea without the context of Matthew might lead you to believe he was talking about his son, Israel, when he brought the whole nation of Israel out of Egypt and into the promised land. So, so you might think, well, this was talking about what God had already done for his people, and that he had called his son out of Egypt, his children, his chosen people, um, his son Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, and he has called them out of Israel or out of Egypt. And so sometimes when we look at this, we say, um, this is an Old Testament thing, but look how God uses something that has already happened. And we were referring to what God did before, but doesn't this sound like it's referring to something that He is now doing? And can't we say, is this a coincidence? Or is God doing things that sound very familiar to us? Is He bringing people from the same places that He brought His people before? Is there parallels that we should see because he is using them to speak to us? And I think that answer is yes, that God has often done that. He's often created parallels that we would recognize, and so we would say, hey, God brought his child out of Egypt before, and now he does this again. Um, Number 6 says, what did Herod do in response to the Magi not returning? A, he was furious. That's not really what he did, but because he was furious, B, he gave orders to kill all the boys in Bethlehem and its vicinity who were 2 years old and under in accordance with the time he had learned from the Magi. So if I can't kill one kid and these people left and did not do what I asked, I'm going to have to, because of them, and I'm sure he blamed it on them because that's what we do, right? I'll show them. They're going to regret not coming back to me because they're going to hear about it because I'm going to kill all boys in this whole region under the age of 2, which is when this boy was to be born. So we're finding out now, so we go back to the story of the Magi when we said, you'd probably already settled in a home by this point, and we're finding out that he may have been as old as 2 years old by the time the Magi were getting there, because that's the age that sort of Herod said, okay, according to when the Magi said the star had appeared, how long did it take them to travel? A long time, and this is how old this boy would be. So we're going to kill all the boys under 2 years of age. Number 7 says, what does Matthew tell us in 2, 17, and 18? And again, a voice is heard in Ramah, weeping in a great mourning, Rachel weeping for her children. So we have this prophecy of Jeremiah, which Jeremiah's prophecy was largely to Israel in the um, in exile, or Israel who was being carried away um, by one kingdom by Babylon, one kingdom by Assyria, and Jerusalem was being attacked. And we could go back and read Jeremiah and Daniel and Ezekiel and all of that and study that. But when you look at Jeremiah, the weeping had to do with the death of the people of Jerusalem. They were being bombarded and starved out, and in a situation where they were having to eat their own feces or cook food over their own feces, and they were being um, unclean. They were defiled because of this, and they were starving, and there was weeping. And that's what Jeremiah, the whole book of Jeremiah, is about. And now Matthew applies that to what's going on now and says, again, this whole area. And by the way, Jerusalem was in that area too, where Bethlehem was, and this whole place. Um, all these children were killed, and the moms were weeping. And Matthew considers that another fulfillment of prophecy. See, Jesus is a fulfillment of prophecy, and we see these Old Testament things that we're talking. Sure, maybe they were talking about something then, but we see it again happening, and history repeats itself. And can't you see it happening again? And so we see this affirmation that Matthew gives us, that we should believe Jesus is who he says he is, because the Old Testament prophets throughout point to them, and we can see these Old Testament prophecies.